Welcome to Talks Music. Our programme today comes from the most famous recording studio on the planet, Abbey Road. And what a fitting location for today's guest, Mr. NILE RODGERS. Rolling Stone magazine said he is a quintessential Zelig of popular music, a guitarist, songwriter, producer, arranger, entrepreneur, and humanitarian who has sold a staggering 110 million records, with his own band Chic and a few other artists you might have heard of: David Bowie, Madonna, Diana Ross, Duran Duran, Sister Sledge, INXS, Debbie Harry, and Brian Ferry. According to a real Rolling Stone, Mick Jagger, Niall was the only man he could trust to produce his first solo album. And with Let's Dance, he gave Bowie his first platinum album in the States. And he produced Madonna's first multi-million selling album, Like a Virgin. He's a genius, said the Material Girl. He can read my mind, and given Madonna's famously strong mind, that's quite a feat. With Chic and songs like Le Freak, Niall and his musical partner, Bernard Edwards, defined disco and created the ultimate feel-good soundtrack to going out on a Friday night. Rodgers has written and produced what are probably the most sampled records in history, but the hits are just part of it. This is one hell of a story. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. NILE RODGERS. Welcome to Talks Music. What a welcome, eh?
Yeah, no kidding. How are you guys?
Thanks so much for coming here today. It really is appreciated. I want to start right at the very beginning, if I may, Niall. You've written an amazing book called Le Freak, an upside-down story of family, disco, and destiny. It's interesting, because the first third of the book is all about your family, and it wasn't an orthodox family by any stretch of the imagination. Now, tell us about your mum and dad.
First of all, let me just say that I adore my mom and dad. So they were heroin addicts and an interracial couple. So it's actually my stepfather that I'm talking about, because my biological father, my mom, he and she were never really together. To have a white father and a black mother in
Pretty
those
unusual.
days, oh man, they were turning heads. And plus my mom is fine. I mean, she's really gorgeous. and my stepfather is central casting handsome. So they were like the it couple.
And your mum was how old when she gave birth?
14.
14.
Yeah.
So pretty young. You yo-yo between New York and LA.
Right.
Why A Tale of Two Cities?
When my mom was pregnant with her second child, she was suffering from what they call postpartum depression, which they didn't know what that was. So every day she used to threaten to kill my brother. And after a while, the doctors determined that she was a danger to herself and others. So we were shipped off to Los Angeles, which is where my paternal grandmother had moved. And,
That was Lenora? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You did read the book. Oh, I thought you were just kidding me. Yeah, so right, I went to live with Lenora for my own safety.
You were kind of brought up by women, surrounded by women.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that had any effect?
You know, there were always lots of men around, because remember I said my mom was really fine, so she had lots of boyfriends. I had the one mother, but 5 stepfathers, because all my brothers have different fathers. So there were a lot of men in my life, but the women were the dominant force.
One of the themes that comes out quite early in the book, Niall, is you are often lonely.
Yes.
And sometimes a little depressed. There's a quote which kind of struck a chord with me. It says, "Just another day in paradise," which is when you're having a good time. And then literally on the next page, you say, "But I felt abandoned like a piece of shit."
Right.
So why are there kind of slightly schizoid feelings, do you think?
My parents were heroin addicts. As they fell deeper into their addiction, a lot of people don't realize that when you're a drug user, it's not just the using of the drugs that's the thing. It's the going out and acquiring. and as a ritual, this drug dealing culture was the precursor to spoken word poetry, hip hop, because the dealers had to have these very sort of colorful come-ons to the prospective customers.
Like their own language.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I cannot tell you how many of these things that I've stolen and stuck in songs.
Give us an example.
There was a song on my first solo album, and the lyric went, poontang, where you want it, slept all night with my hands on it. I heard that when I was 6 years old.
Poontang's pretty good.
The poontang was fantastic. I mean, I had the lyrics and everything. That was the hook.
Tell us a little bit about some of the music that you were kind of soaking up as a kid.
My folks were real music aficionados. I mean, they loved music. They lived and breathed it, even though they weren't musicians. My biological father, by the way, was a brilliant musician.
Congo player, yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were they listening to? Was it kind of Nancy Wilson? Was it?
Oh, yeah. In my own household,
yeah.
My own household was really a jazz household. Nina Simone was huge in our house. Oscar Brown Jr., Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. Thelonious Monk used to come over to our house like weekly. When you're a drug dealer, you have, especially in Greenwich Village, you have interesting clientele. So, you know, it was not common in my house to have Lenny Bruce come by. Like, I didn't know these people were famous. I knew that they were cool, but I didn't know they were famous. So, I mean, Thelonious Monk, I met Thelonious Monk, I was 7 years old. Things were very cool, incredibly intellectual. There was pressure on me, as there's pressure on every child, to be cooler than your parents. How the hell would you be cooler than those guys?
Wow.
They were really cool. So when I became around 11 years old or so, I started to explore drugs that even my parents wouldn't do. So if your parents are heroin addicts, like, what do you do to outdo them? So I went to hallucinogenic drugs, and I started sniffing glue and doing acid, and I was never afraid, even though you are absolutely right. I felt lonely, and because of that extreme loneliness in my own home, because my parents were there but not available. And it wasn't because they were mean, it was just because they were high.
There was a huge amount of love and open-mindedness, obviously, but kind of compassion as well.
Yeah.
You were in a very loving environment.
My parents are wonderful. I mean, they're great. They're really great. Yeah. But because of their addiction, they were so self-centered.
And when was the first time, Niall, that you actually had a guitar in your hands?
I grew up playing classical music, playing the flute and the clarinet primarily. And I think I was around 15 or 16 years old, somewhere in that period. I picked up the guitar because I was staying with one of my uncle's paramours, and she had a beautiful daughter, and the daughter had a great band, and they just needed a guitar player. So I lied and I told her I could play guitar. Oops. Now, I tuned this guitar to what I thought was appropriate and then proceeded to make a complete fool of myself. I played really horrible stuff. And the girl laughed at me. Wow. And I decided I was going to learn to play guitar so I can go back and get the girl.
And there's a wonderful light bulb moment, isn't it? When you sit down with, was it Graham?
Graham, and he's the father of my brother who's closest to me in age. I have 4 brothers.
He picks up the guitar that you were trying to play.
Right. He picks up the guitar and he says, man, how do you got this thing tuned like a banjo? What is this? So he retuned the guitar for me. This is no kidding. This is exactly how it happened. He retuned the guitar, and I strummed the chord, and it was beautiful. It was perfect. And I went, bang. And I hit the next chord, and it was right. And then I hit the next chord, and it was right.
And the rest was history.
Oh, it was ridiculous. I felt like I was the first person who ever played guitar, the first person who ever climbed Mount Everest.
You said it was like your first orgasm.
It was. You're right. That's what I said, but it's true.
Niall, your partner in crime, if you will, Bernard Edwards.
Yes.
How did you meet? I think you call it hippie happenstance.
Yes.
Which is a beautiful phrase, which I guess is kind of fate.
Yeah. Bernard Edwards was the most brilliant musician I've ever known. He worked at the post office. He had a normal day job. He worked alongside my then girlfriend's mom, who I was living with. And she notices that I'm working with some musicians and I'm trying to start a band. And she says, wow, this cat is bad. You got to meet him. Anyway, so she gives me Bernard's phone number, and I call him up and I say, I'm putting together this band, you know, and it's going to be like a cross between Fairport Convention meets like Hendrix, man, meets like, you know, Ornette Coleman, man, you know. So like, you know, if you want to get down with us, that would be cool, you know. And Bernard looked at the phone and said, yo, my man, lose my number. Click. And that was it. So, you know, to me, it didn't mean anything. So I went on a pickup gig, and I ran in, and I was late for the gig because they called me at the last minute. And the band was playing. They were pretty good, but the bass player was extraordinary. I don't know if you know Sissy Strut, but it's like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So Bernard is just supposed to be playing whatever the bass line is, which I don't know what the hell it was, because he's playing. And I'm like, damn. So we play, and this is the first time we meet. And from that moment on, you couldn't separate. It was like crazy glue. If he got a gig, he'd always tell the band leader, hey man, I got a great guitar player. If I got a gig, I'd say, I got a great bass player. And it was the perfect musical duo, because he was the platoon sergeant. He made everybody work, and I just came up with thousands and thousands of songs, and that he would arrange and make sense of, because my mind is
partnership.
Yeah, my mind's just a waterfall of stuff. And one day he and I are on the subway, and my girlfriend's mom gets on the subway. She walks past me and says, so I see you guys finally hooked up. And he's going, is that the motherfucker?
I'm not sure if this wasn't with Bernard, but you end up in London.
Yeah.
It
was with Bernard.
You were with Bernard in London.
Absolutely.
An interesting thing happened there, because an encounter with Roxy Music actually leads on to you coming up with a formula for Chic. And I think you lose your girlfriend and you lose your passport, but you're stuck there. And the band go back. So
and they leave me.
What happened?
I lost my girlfriend in America. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend in London, thank God. The mid-'70s. London was really happening. I mean, the music scene, the clubs, it was all really buzzing. So this band that I had never heard of, called Roxy Music, was playing at some joint called like the Roxy Theater or the Roxy Playhouse or the Roxy something. So I'm with my fly girlfriend, and we walk in, and the crowd is fly and fabulous, and the band is fly and fabulous. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen, and the name of the band matches the name of the venue. And like, you know, being the hippie kind of guy I was, I took in this information as a totally immersive artistic experience in music. It had like fashion models on the cover of the record. I was like, wow, this shit is really cool. Like, let me figure out how to do the black version of that. So if you go back and you look at our first Chic album cover, that's what we did. 4 letters, Chic, just like Roxy, 4 letters. And Bernard and I knew that we weren't stars, you know, because stars look like stars. They look like Bowie, they look like Sting. We didn't look like that. So we hid behind the makeup of fabulous clothing and the 2 girls. All of this is part of what I call the DHM, is understanding the philosophy, the story of Chic, and everything that we did at that time had to reflect that narrative. It had to be Chic.
Could you just explain what this magic ingredient was?
So basically, when we use the term DHM, which stood for deep hidden meaning, it really translates into DNA, really understanding the core essence of a song. And if you don't understand that song's essential truth, and you're the producer or the arranger or the orchestrator or even maybe the player, if you don't understand that core truth, how can you transmit that to others? How do you transmit that to the listeners if you don't know what the hell you're playing or what you're talking about? What wound up happening was, because that was so important to me to understand every song's essential truth, it made me a much better songwriter. The one thing I also explain to you folks is that I have this weird condition. I don't know if it's a medical condition or if I'm some kind of freak of nature, but I see the world in music. I see the girl in the red, and there's music going on, and I'm never stuck. There's never a moment where I can't write something new, because everything I do is based on reality. It's all nonfiction. It's all the truth. So
a lot of that sense of philosophy and the chic organization you felt kind of should be reflected somehow in the music as well. That there should be a different kind of sound.
Yeah, what we did typically,
this is exciting.
typically R&B music and dance music, but R&B music in general is usually based on the blues. So what we did with Chic, we tried to do the opposite of that. We tried to go back to an era in American music where it was all sort of based on jazz and really cool harmonies. Just to give you an example, the very first song ever written that I ever wrote for Chic was called Everybody Dance. What it is C minor 7, no big deal. B flat 11, or what we traditionally may call A flat triad with a B flat in the bass, to B flat triad with a C in the bass, or what we like to call C11. But here's where it gets cool. A flat major 7 to D minor 11 with an A in the bass, to an A flat 11. And the reason why it's so important to the harmony or to the motion of the song is because when I wrote this, I knew Bernard's incredible technique and his capabilities.
But Bernard had a problem with one of the lyrics, didn't he?
Oh yeah, because because before I sang it, I played. That's the first thing he heard me play. So I was in there jamming. So I'm just jamming. And he went, all right, brother, that's cool. So what's the hook? And I went, everybody dance, do-do-do-do, clap your hands, clap your hands. And he went, my man, that's cool, but what the fuck does do-do-do-do mean? I said, well, it means the same thing as la 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 la. He said, well, why don't we go, everybody dance, la 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 la, clap your hands. I said, because la 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 is not happening. Everything was fly, Robin, fly, do 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 do. Everything during the disco era was do 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 do. La 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 was dead, and that's the very first song we recorded. At that time, we were Luther Vandross's backup band, and we were doing a show at Radio City Music Hall. And in those days, there were 2 shows a day. So during the intermission, we ran and we cut Everybody Dance. We cut this song. It cost us $10 to cut, because the only $10 we paid was the elevator operator to not tell the boss that we were in the studio recording after hours. And then we ran back and we did our second show with Luther. So that actually became the vocal foundation of Chic.
And you go to a club, the guy says, you've got to come down to this club because there's something I want you to hear. And they're playing Everybody Dance on a loop.
Yeah. Well,
and you still haven't got a record deal at this point?
No. So my DJ friend, he started playing our record before we got our record deal. We'd go to the club and we'd see people on the dance floor going, everybody dance, and they all scream, doo-doo-doo-doo. And I used to look up and down and go, what were you saying about the doo-doo-doo, my man? So there you go, brother, doo-doo-doo. Remember that moment.
Now, you finally get a record deal with Atlantic.
Yes.
And the success is phenomenal. The records are just
huge.
Hitting the huge. They're enormous.
They're enormous.
And it all happens very, very quickly with Dance, Dance, Dance.
Everybody Dance. I Want Your Love, Le Freak, Good Times, We Are Family, He's the Greatest Dancer, Lost in Music, Le Freak, which is our biggest single ever, is the only triple platinum single in the history of Atlantic Records.
Wow.
So this is the label with the Stones, Cream, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin.
Let's talk about Le Freak just for a second, because this is a pop song, which has a long, almost jazz break in it.
Most pop songs have a middle 8, maybe a middle 16, maybe, no, they don't have a middle 32, and they certainly don't have a middle 64 or whatever it is. Our whole middle of our song was just, now freak. Basically what we were two instrumentalists, like two jazz guys, jazz, R&B, funk guys who learned how to write pop songs. And we just played that endlessly, and then just to invert it, I'd start going. And I go. And
the head of Atlantic Records had another band that he was very keen for you to produce.
Studio 54 was just the center of the disco universe at that time, and he believed that we could give this magic fairy dust that we had in a bottle that we had captured Studio 54 onto anybody. So he suggested a group called Sister Sledge that they really liked. The group was like family to the label. We decided that we would do Sister Sledge and write this album called We Are Family, which, believe it or not, I consider maybe my best album, pound for pound. Like, every song to me on that record is amazing. The riff in We Are Family I had thought of gazillions of years prior to that in Woodstock, and I had stolen a riff from this group, the Children of God, which was this. They had in one of their songs, and I was like, wow, I gotta put that in a song someday. So I stuck in We Are Family at the last minute. So we go. And I bet you know this song. We are family. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing. So,
Wow. Now, this guitar you're playing now, this has got a bit of a story, hasn't it? It's a Fender Stratocaster.
yeah, this is a Fender Strat. This guitar has played on, we've estimated it to be about $3 billion worth of music. It's
I
pretty
just got
insane.
goosebumps.
It's insane.
Can we talk about one that was really to kind of change your life? Your hippie chance, you call it.
Hippie happenstance.
Hippie happenstance of meeting Diana Ross.
We were doing a show in Los Angeles, and we look back, and there's Diana Ross standing like in the wings backstage, and she's watching us play. And pretty much it was love at first sight. And we agreed to do her next album, which was simply called Diana. So once we got into the vibe of composing the songs, one night I was out at a transvestite club. In New York, when you want to go hear the hippest music, you always go to underground clubs. And I went into the bathroom at the Gilded Grape, and I just happened to notice, just in this one moment, that on either side of me were like at least 2 deep on either side Diana Ross impersonators, male Diana Ross impersonators. I'm standing there at the urinal, and like, I'm like going, wow, what is this? And so I'm just thinking to myself, what if we wrote a song that recognized her alliance or her iconic status with the gay community? Like, what if we did that song? So I ran outside, I called my boy. I said, Bernard, we have to write a song called I'm Coming Out. In those days, to say I'm coming out was almost the same thing as James Brown going, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. So I'm Coming Out would be very, very risque and provocative.
Controversial.
Yeah, and we recorded it. Diana loved it. And then what happened is that she went out to play the song, to play the record for the biggest DJ in America at the time. And he told her that the record would ruin her career. She came back to the studio in tears and said to us, why are we trying to ruin her career? It's the only time in my life I've ever lied to an artist. I looked at Diana and I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, are people gonna think I'm gay? And we said, Diana, in black music, when we start the show, what do we call that song? I don't know. We call it our coming out song. For the rest of your natural life, every time you walk out on the stage, they're gonna go, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Diana Ross. Coming out, right? So I said, Diana, this is gonna be your fanfare. After I play this little guitar intro, a fanfare actually happens. The horns come in and go, guess what song they play every time Diana walks out on stage to this very day? Ladies and gentlemen, Diana Ross, did it. That's what they do.
Amazing story, Nile. And then by pure chance, you have again one of these fateful meetings with a guy sitting at the bar. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, the story I think you're talking about is when Billy Idol and I, we walked into this after-hours joint called the Continental. And when Billy and I walk in, we could see David Bowie sitting at the back bar. So I just get brave and I walk over to him and say, hey, David, how are you? I'm Nile Rodgers. And before you know it, we're talking about jazz and our love of jazz. And all the musicians David knew, I knew. And we went from, way avant-garde, to the deepest, wacky, off-the-wall, atonal stuff, the most cool stuff, just everything.
So how did it go from a little chance encounter in a bar to recording his biggest platinum album? How did that happen?
We clicked, and he invited me over to Switzerland, which is where he was living at the time. And so I went to stay there for a few days to do pre-production. We just looked at pictures, looked at music, looked at stuff, read, no music at all, just images. Shows you how brilliant this guy is. It's just absolute genius. He looks at me one day out of the clear blue sky and he says, Nile, darling, look at that, and it's a picture of Little Richard. Little Richard was wearing a red suit, getting into a red Cadillac, and his hair was like up to there. And David goes, nah, you see that? That's rock and roll. That's what I want my album to sound like. And I was like, at that point, I got it. This may sound abstract. This is what we call band logic, not to be confused with actual logic. But to me, I was clear as a bell. And I'm in my bedroom one morning, and he walks in, and he's got a 12-string folk guitar, and he starts like strumming like. So anyway, he said to me, I think the song is going to be called Let's Dance, and I think it's going to be a hit. I was like, whoa, I'm a dance guy, I'm black, I got people at home expecting a lot from me. I was like, man, this ain't gonna work. So I said, okay, David, teach me the song and let me do an arrangement. Now, remember, I now know who I'm dealing with. I know that this is a sophisticated musician who understands jazz and he understands harmony, and he's a special guy. So the first thing I did is I put it up on the neck, something like that. And that sounded funkier and tighter because it wasn't jangly. It was, so I moved it up to B flat, knowing that. And then just by going, and moving up to, all of a sudden it got brighter. And then because I know David is cool,
I put it up an octave, and I went, and then smooth voice leading, so you guys all follow this lesson. So we go, which I'm now putting the 11 on the top, and then I wanted to come down to, so I went from the B flat minor 11 to B flat minor 13. Not what you hear in your average pop song. And then like a cool inversion of a 6 chord, but I kept an E flat in the bass by making it sort of like a E flat minor, but it really is a 6 chord when you hear the bass line. And then back to straight B flat minor just to resolve it and bring that peaceful feeling to the end of the progression.
And when you put that all together?
It comes out like this.
So that album, I think, recorded the whole thing in 17 days?
Yeah,
17
everything,
days,
mixed and everything.
And it is enormous.
Yeah,
It
huge.
is enormous.
Yeah.
So you've cracked Diana Ross, you've cracked David Bowie, and then another woman enters your life who you described as the classic diamond in the rough. You know who I'm talking about?
This is the only one, Madonna. When I met Madonna, I went to a nightclub, and she was raw. Her vocal wasn't pristine at all, but she believed in it. So I went backstage, and we met, brief encounter, and then over the next few weeks, she convinced me that she was the one and only. You know, I've done a lot of records with a lot of amazing, extraordinary people, but I've never met anyone with the tenacity and the focus of Madonna. She said to me, once we decided that we were gonna work together, she played me the demo of her album. And she said to me, very matter-of-factly, well, Nile, if you don't love all these songs, we can't work together. And I looked at her and I said, wow, I don't love all these songs, but the one thing you can depend on is when we finish with them, I will. You know, it's like, and then she trusted me emphatically, except for one really bad argument. I wanted the song Material Girl to come out first because I just thought it was a better song. And then Madonna sat me down and told me how important a girl losing her virginity was. And also, remember, the album says Madonna, produced by NILE RODGERS. Madonna, produced by NILE. So it's her record. I ultimately was gonna bend, but I wanted her to convince me.
And I think you did quite an interesting deal on it, didn't you?
Wow, you know everything. Yeah, what happened was, by the time we did the contract, I really believed in Madonna. But it seemed like that belief was semi-one-sided. So the only reason why they would have agreed to it is because they didn't think that I could sell that many records. I think at my last count, Like a Virgin is somewhere around 20-something million. It's ridiculous. It's
20 million plus.
It's the biggest record of my life.
Now, here's the hard part. You're playing the Budokan in Japan.
Yeah.
And this was a gig that, not necessarily in a good way, was going to change your life forever.
Yeah. I invite Steve Winwood, Simon Le Bon, Slash, Bernard Edwards, Sister Sledge, and we go to Japan because they're honoring me as super producer. Like, okay, right, cool, super, big deal. And this is in April of '96. And we did 3 nights there, and the gig was killing. Every single night, sold out, amazing show. And the last night, Bernard collapses right before the intermission. And the song that we were playing was Let's Dance, by the way. So I'm standing up front. I didn't know that Bernard had passed out. They revived him, and he continues playing, and he comes in a really good spot. I'm like going, damn, my man is remixing my record back there, and he's killing. And so we finished that set, and we go backstage, and Bernard says, man, did you see that? I said, did I see what? He said, I passed out. I said, that's what that was? He said, look, man, do you mind if I sit down and play the rest of the show? And I said, no, of course I don't mind. You know, do what you got to do. He does the second half of the show, and I could see that he's really fragile. And at the end of the night, he goes back to his hotel room. The next day, they ring my room, and they tell me that Mr. Edwards won't answer his wake-up call. So I knock on his door until my fingers go raw, and finally I say to housekeeping, look, open the door. And when they open the door, I could see that he's lying on the sofa like this, and his feet are on the arm of the sofa. And in a split second, I knew that he was dead, but my brain wouldn't accept it. It was a very bittersweet ending to a wonderful relationship because, you know, we went out after doing a great show, and it's a great show. And when I put out the DVD, I purposely didn't fix it. I mean, I could have fixed it and made it amazing, but I kept it in its original form to pay tribute to him.
And it's a wonderful tribute, and his playing on it is just phenomenal. It's almost
unbelievable.
Like he went to another level.
It's very, yeah.
Winding right forward now, that didn't stop you now. You've carried on, you've mentored and helped a lot of new artists and continue to help a lot of new artists. Right, Niall, at this point in Talks Music, some of the audience have got questions which they've been yearning to ask you. So, who's going to be the first one? Here we go.
Hi, now. My name's Dax, and I'm an aspiring record
What's
producer.
your name?
Dax.
My little brother's name is Dax.
Really?
Dude,
Wow.
are you kidding me?
No, ever meet another one? That's really good news.
You got one, man. My little brother is Dax.
I'm an aspiring record producer from Atlanta, Georgia, and as a producer, what is your technique for making your artists feel comfortable, relaxed, and inspired in their performances?
It usually happens well before we get into the studio. I bond so closely with the artist because I really need to know who they are, else how the hell do I make that record? So I try and let the person know that I'm absolutely here for you, and I'm gonna do the best job possible, that you can depend on that. And if I suggest something, it's because I really believe in it. However, if you believe in something else, show me why your idea is better. That's really who I am.
Another question, please.
I'm Steve. More recently, you've worked on a few video game soundtracks, is that correct?
Yeah, I own a record company that specializes in video game music.
I read that you worked on the Halo soundtrack.
Yes.
What was different about producing for that than for pop music?
Good question.
Actually, that's an amazing question. Unfortunately, with video games, music, we're sort of like the lowest rung on the ladder. So it's a unique relationship because that's the one relationship where I do have a relationship beyond the artistic people because I have to make the deal with the powers that be, and then my emotion trickles down to the composers. But the biggest difference is that you have to bond with them over a longer period of time because the process is a lot more involved than making a pop record. I mean, linear production, like a film or a record, is very different than vertical production like you do with a video game. The great composers with video games have to make sure that the user experience is the same as if you're an expert, and that kind of composition is really tricky.
Got one more?
Hi, my name's Lisa. I was just wondering, when you were saying you walked into the room and you just saw colours and heard music, could you give us a performance of this or tell us more what you see now?
Ah, that's great. That's fantastic. So here's what I mean by that. So when I look around the room or when I'm just in real life, what's going through my head, it's music, but mainly it's phrases and titles and it's melodies and things like that that are connected. So, for example, when I walked into this room, the first thing that I was taken with was her orange sweater. But then when you asked me that question, even while you were talking, I was thinking of the song The Woman in Red by Stevie Wonder, but for some reason I was thinking of the film Men in Black because you were a woman in black. Why? I don't know. And a melody didn't come to my head, a title came to my head. And while I'm talking to you now, I'm hearing Patrice Rushen. Well, actually, I'm hearing Will Smith. Here come the men in black. So that's, you know, it's just, it's sometimes it's not new composition, sometimes it's regurgitating old stuff, but it never stops. It's just always there.
Now, Niall, at this point in Talks Music, I'm going to ask you a single sentence question, and you've got to answer with one single sentence reply. It's called single file.
Okay, cool. Let's go, let's do it.
Okay. Single biggest mistake of your life?
Not writing and producing a single for Miles Davis.
Single biggest achievement?
Good Times by Chic going #1 in 1979 when they said disco sucks.
Single most embarrassing moment?
Walking out on stage to play Good Times while they were shouting disco sucks.
Single most romantic moment?
Having to make sure Bernard's body was returned home to his family after he passed away in 1996. The role reversal in my life, from him being the band leader and the guy in charge and me being the jokester, to me having to now be the adult and make sure that his body was returned to his family.
Single favorite artist of all time?
The only honest answer would be that means the artist that's had the largest effect on me, and it would have to be Bernard Edwards.
Single event which changed your life forever?
Getting my first record deal at Atlantic Records.
And finally, single ambition you've yet to achieve?
I don't know, man. I have inner peace. I've been fighting with cancer for the last 2 years. I'm at peace with it. I do what I gotta do. I work like a maniac. I have a charity that keeps me grounded. Life is really good, you know. Okay, so here's the answer. I've done everything that I've wanted to do, and I just keep continuing to do that.
Nile Rodgers, thank you for coming here today and talking music with us.
Thank you.